Let me ask you, where do you think this is going to end? A lot of people seemingly missed the shift in narrative. In LA, when they sent in ICE to round up the illegals and then lend guard support to protect public buildings as well as protect the backs of ICE, and then, of course, activated local Marines, it was all about the immigrants. And a couple of weeks later, they rolled into DC, where it's no longer about just the immigrants. It's now about American citizens, such as, for instance, the homeless. Where in 2024, when he was on the campaign trail, he said we're going to have to clean up our cities and make them pretty again, which is also something that Pam Bondi just repeated on a Fox News segment. So they started rounding up Americans, US citizens who are homeless, and sent them off to destination unknown. It doesn't matter where they end up. To them, all that matters is they're no longer there. And the National Guard activity in DC is supported by National Guards from 3 other states. Now, why would they do that? Well, because if you push the patience and the pain thresholds of the general public long enough, then at some point you're going to expect some level of mutiny. And where would we go if we want to face the oppressor? Well, to the Capitol, of course. But we are going to think twice when the Capitol is crawling with military armed to the teeth. That's how you fortify against the perceived enemy. At the same time, Pam Bondi shows up on a Fox News segment saying that if sanctuary cities, of course that's the blue cities, are not compliant with the regime's demands, they're going to turn off the money, which means that sanctuary cities are going to have to reduce their programs, their social programs. That in itself is inviting mayhem in those cities. And if mayhem ensues, they have enough justification to say, well, we're going to clean up that city too. However, if the city is in compliance, mayhem is still going to ensue because they are going to send ICE with mass staff into the city and then, of course, roll in with the support of the guards. In other words, it's a lose-lose situation for the cities. And that is likely going to happen much sooner than you think in a city near you. And it's not just going to be confined to the blue cities, because those cities that are reasonably purple, if you will, are still going to find themselves on their docket as well, because opposition could ensue there. And then there are small pockets in cities that are red cities, where you will find increased presence of armed forces just the same. In other words, what I'm describing to you here is the American version of fascism. And my question renews at this point. What do you think is going to happen? And more importantly, how long do we keep this going? Because there is probably direct proportionality, if you will, as far as the time of how long we allow this to continue is directly proportional to the bloodshed it's going to take to repair that which we have allowed to fester. I don't know the answer to this, hence I'm asking you, when is it going to be enough? Now, the problem with it being enough, and I've recorded and then written on here at length, is that most of us are just still sitting in this performative threshold. We think that a protest, no kings and what have you, is enough, and then on Monday we go back to work. I still feel that any kind of peaceful protest is validating that they are on the right track. They're not looking at this as oh, wait a minute, the public objects to what we're doing. They're looking at this through the lens of, oh, the public objects, therefore we're doing the right thing. It's empowering to them. And on Monday we go back to work. Now, the problem is that a standoff is something that we are likely going to lose at such numbers that it would critically endanger us, because we have 360 million people in this country, or 340, whatever change. And a lot of them are actually in favor of what is happening right now, which is leading us down the path of the potential of a civil war. Definitely not something that we would want. So how would we stop this? Again, something that I've talked about in the past that is incredibly difficult to pull off because it looks for collectivism, for us coming together and withhold work, withhold labor, and withhold financial compliance. Well, for the most part, the financial compliance piece is going to get easier and easier to withhold because most of us are going to be unable to afford shit anyway. So not paying your bills is not something that is a factor of mutiny. It's just a factor of unaffordability. That's going to come also pretty soon. And until that happens, we still feel the pressure that we cannot rise. Except we have to overcome that pressure, and we must rise, because otherwise we're going to be subdued, and subduing is what happens right now. So therein comes the element of fascism again. So I'm kind of sort of coming in circles here. So let me end with this. How and when do you think this is going to end?